Chuck Reddick told a subcommittee of the Senate Appropriations Committee last month that the agency planned to hire 10,000 employees, half this year and the other half next year. Reddick also added that the IRS began holding jobs fairs almost immediately after the fiscal year 2022 spending bill passed. The IRS has already created multiple search teams focused on processing a backlog of paper tax returns. The IRS on search teams comes from other parts of the agency, including enforcement and answering taxpayers' phone calls. Lawmakers have officially come together to take a plan for the American people. President Biden's fourth stimulus package is almost complete. Democrats just have to come to a few agreements on key provisions, and $2,000 direct checks may be going out this month. Here's some awesome news for those of you that live in the state of Maine. The state's plans to send out $850 checks to eligible taxpayers this week and expects to have the vast majority mailed by the end of the month. But that is if officials can't find enough envelopes. The supplemental budget proposed by Maine Governor Janet Mills and approved by lawmakers in April allocated about $730 million for the checks, as a way to use one-time surplus funds to help taxpayers cope with inflation. An estimated 850,000 people across the state will receive $850 checks to help alleviate rising prices caused by inflation. To be eligible, individuals must file their income tax return by October 31st as a full-time Maine resident. However, they cannot be claimed as dependent and must have a federal adjusted gross income of less than that. The legislature's Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee effectively cleared the way for the state to begin issuing the checks by granting permission to process some of the funds ahead of the schedule. The budget called for distributing roughly half this month and the rest beginning in July. Officials stated that they are requesting the additional allotment to ensure that the Department of Revenue Services is able to process all payments as soon as administratively feasible, assuming there are no glitches and we could send out a significant portion of checks in June. One of the glitches may be a shortage of stationery. Global supply chain problems are delaying deliveries on paper products, including envelopes, which are needed to deliver the checks. And Republican Representative Jim Banks has suggested it would be a good idea to give each American $1,000 with a new stimulus package. Banks, who represents Indiana's 3rd Congressional District, told Fox News that billions of dollars could be used to give Americans $1,000 each. The cost of giving each American $1,000 would be significantly high. The population is currently more than 300 million, and that would cost a lot more than $300 billion. The IRS reported in its progress update that it had paid out more than $800 billion to Americans across 3 stimulus checks in 2020 and 2021. There has been a large amount of support for a 4th stimulus check as individual states continue to provide their own stimulus payments and other measures like tax rebates. The White House already launched a new push to contain the political damage caused by inflation, after Biden complained for weeks to aides that his administration was not doing enough.
Questions?
Thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Ransomware attacks have wreaked havoc on communities across Arizona and our country. From last year's attack on the city of Kingman to the recent attempted hack against Yuma Regional Medical Center, ransomware disrupts our lives, breaches sensitive data, and causes real-world harm. Our bipartisan infrastructure law invests in state and local cybersecurity to combat ransomware, and I co-sponsored legislation creating new cyber incident reporting requirements. So we need to continue to work together to enhance our cybersecurity and hold hackers and the countries that provide them safe harbor accountable. So my first question is for you, Ms. Coven. In March, your company's co-founder testified before the Senate Banking Committee. I asked him about some of the more sophisticated techniques used by ransomware gangs to make ransom payments harder to trace, including the use of Mixer and Tumblr services to combine cryptocurrency from illicit sources with crypto from lawful sources. Mr. Levin noted that chain analysis has actually been able to successfully demix certain transactions. Without revealing your specific demixing capabilities, could you expand on this, and how great of a threat to ransomware investigations do cryptocurrency mixers currently pose?
Thank you for your question. And this is an especially important topic because we have identified mixers being incorporated more frequently into ransomware laundering techniques. And as you mentioned, we have recently publicly disclosed our demixing capabilities. And while we can't go into details because of ongoing investigations, what I can say is that we make every effort to identify all available mixers that these threat actors might be able to use so that our law enforcement partners and investigators, when conducting and tracking ransomware payments, can understand when they're tracing into a mixer and do not attempt to trace through it.
You help victims negotiate with hackers and protect their specific company from further harm. While paying a ransom might be the smart move for a particular victim, these payments are the fuel that motivates hackers to keep launching additional attacks. So how do you balance the immediate need to restore a client's systems with the concern that paying a ransom might put a target on your client's back in the future? And when the decision is made,
Elon Musk threatening again to walk away from his deal to buy Twitter, saying the social media company has thwarted his attempts to get information on fake accounts. And now the Texas Attorney General is launching a probe into Twitter. It is looking into whether bots are deceiving consumers and businesses. Gene Munster is following all these developments. He is managing partner of Loop Ventures. You're out at the WWDC, Gene. Great to have you with us. You say you're surprised Twitter stock is not down more. You think this deal is ultimately going to be scrapped at this point?
Well, the odds are going down, Melissa. I joined you a couple weeks ago and I suggested there's a 70% chance that this gets done. I've revised that to 50%, so it's a toss of the coin. But if you do the weighted, the reason why I think shares should be lower, if you do the weights of what potentially could happen, I think there's a weighted 10% downside. Before I thought it was kind of a flattish outcome. So I simply think that this is purely for entertainment purposes. I would not advise trying to play this from a trade perspective.
It seems like obviously there's a big factor of whether or not the deal goes through, Gene, in terms of the impact on the price. But then even separate of that, let's say Twitter is standalone, there's a huge question mark now over how many accounts the company actually has. And so I'm wondering if you needed to separate these two things, how much is that to the stock, that piece of the puzzle, that maybe all the accounts that it says it has may not be there?
I don't think it has much of an impact on the stock at this point. I think that this is the other piece to this. The two developments today is the probability of this deal getting done are going down. The second development is this is increasingly becoming politicalized, and I think that Elon's influence is on display here. And I think that it's not about the number of bots that they have ultimately. I don't think Elon is really concerned whether it's 5 or 6 or 8% bots. He says it's 20. I think that would be a difficult number to prove. But I think what's at stake here is some principle around frustration that Elon has with Twitter and how they've performed, the type of information they've shared with him. They say they've been forthright. I think that is what is really gnawing at this. And ultimately, Elon's influence, how famous he is going to have a profound impact on the valuation of Twitter. And so you need to separate yourself from the fundamentals. The fundamentals are being negatively impacted by all this chatter. But I think at the end of the day, as investors, I think their vote of confidence is going to be diminishing here, too, not because of any bot numbers, but just because now we've politicalized this between the left and the right.